Thank you very much for coming. This topic I find is really an important one because it helps to make sense out of the somewhat confusing Jewish world we find ourselves in. Because a lot of the old categories of thought about what it means to be Jewish are in flux. And people are living very differently today with different values than they did 50 years ago, when many of us were born or grew up. So our challenge is to make sense of how this evolution happened, where it came from, and what it means to be Jewish today. And there are a number of angles we're going to look at. Today, in the morning, we're going to talk about what is a Jew, what does it mean to be Jewish today. In the afternoon, we'll turn to the question of doing Jewish. What does it mean to live as a Jewish person, or maybe to do Jewish things even if you're not Jewish? After all, you don't have to be Jewish to make a hamantash or spin a dreidel. And what does it mean if someone does that from another cultural background, but is experiencing Jewish life in some way? It may be on their own, it may be with their life partner, and it may be if they're raising Jewish kids. So we'll have to explore a little bit about the doing Jewish in the afternoon. What I wanted to do to start is to go back to an old question, which is, what does it mean to look Jewish? Who looks Jewish? Well, if you search for Jewish images on Google, you'll find a lot of things like this. That this looks Jewish, right? He's praying at the Western Wall. He's got the black hat and the long beard, and that's what people think of when they see Jew. I don't know, does anyone know sign language? So do you know the sign language for Jew?
I'm wondering if it's this.
It's this.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a long beard.
Yeah. Wow.
That's the sign language symbol for Jew. So it all fits back in the stereotype of what a Jew looks like. But of course, they're not all the same anymore. We're not all the same. We look very differently today. So this is one example of what a Jew might look like, but here's another one. This looks like an Israeli from a Middle Eastern or North African background. What we call Mizrahi or Eastern. We used to say Oriental, but now that's not a nice term anymore. But she could be fluent in Arabic from her home life. She might have even been born in Iran or in Syria. A number of Jews came from Syria to Israel in the last 20 years. Or in North Africa and come over in the 50s or 60s, or had her parents come over, but because they were Insular communities, she's still from that ethnic background.
She even has nice nails.
Yes.
Wild.
And her nails are in good shape. Well, you don't think this was a stage picture? Okay. Now, this could also be a Jewish person, a nanotechnology entrepreneur texting on her phone in Tel Aviv. That's also a model of Jewishness. These are Ethiopian Israeli Jews. There's a substantial number of Israelis who are from Ethiopia originally, but live Jewish lives, are participating in Jewish communities, celebrating Jewish holidays, and serving the Israeli army and so on. So these are also people who, quote, look Jewish. You have lots of Russian Jews, both here in Southern California, also all across North America. In Australia, there's a sizable Russian Jewish population, and also in Israel, obviously. Here you see campaign posters in both Hebrew and in Russian in Israel. And you can tell who the Russian guys are in the poster, right? The haircut sort of gives it away.
Yeah.
Now this is an American Jew who's a professor at Haifa University, from Philadelphia originally. But he's sort of the classic Ashkenazi Jewish background that we're familiar with. But there's also this guy. He goes by the pen name Manishtana, from the 4 questions. He's an African-American Jew based in New York. They're just starting a Jewish community center for Jews of color based in New York. Some of these people come out of a conversion experience. Others were adopted into Ashkenazi Jewish families. Or there's also a movement called the Black Hebrews, which claims itself as sort of one of the lost tribes, and some people from that background have found their way into the more mainstream Jewish community instead of the more separatist Black Hebrew background. And the last picture is this person. Anyone recognize who that is? This is she's a rabbi. This is Angela Buchdahl. She is the chief rabbi of the Central Synagogue in New York City, one of the largest Reform congregations in the country. Her father was Jewish, her mother was Korean, but she converted I mean, she has Jewish heritage anyway. She also went through a formal conversion process. She's actually a rabbi and a cantor. She jokingly calls it a ranter.
A ranter.
And she served as the senior rabbi at Central Synagogue in New York for maybe 10, 15 years, something like that. So again, what it means to look Jewish, we have to get past the old stereotypes of the old beard, Ashkenazi, white, big nose, whatever, whether we're being racist about it or just our own bias. That they look like our family, they look like our neighbors growing up. Well, that's just not what counts as Jewish these days. And if you go to a Jewish day school, if you go to a Reform or even a conservative synagogue, you'll see a much wider range of faces, especially in this area because you've got a large number of Persian Jews, there are plenty of Sephardic Jews as well, and the Russian Jews and so on. So you have a range of Jewish experiences and faces. But after all, if I asked you, what does an American look like? You would have the same range of faces. Right? You wouldn't have just one version. At least those on the left end of the political spectrum might say. There's no one way to look American. And the answer is all of the above to these questions of are these faces Jewish? There are many varieties of American Jew, both denominationally, in terms of practice, and in terms of ethnic background and culture. So